Buckle up, everyone. Tonight, we're building concrete reinforcing meshes one wire at a time. Friends, back in 2013, this was a brand new release from Trumpeter. I bought it ASAP, built it out of the box, and finished it as this greasy Syrian BMP based on a pretty famous photograph at the time. It's one of the last remaining models in my cabinet, so I considered giving it a makeover, but then, after finding some interesting ideas, I decided it was just easier to get a new kit, get some blink for it, and start with a clean slate. I started building it right after we came home from our honeymoon vacation, so I was fully rested and energized, and that meant starting the build by cutting the model apart with a rotary tool. You see, the photo-etched mudguards attach to the model just like on the real ones, but the plastic ones in the kit do not. So this entire segment just had to go, and I needed to rebuild it with plastic art to mimic real life. I actually had to guess how it was done, because this part is always obscured by the mudguards, so finding a good photograph under the right angle is not the easiest job. At the same time, I did the only bit of filling that's required on this model. I remembered it from the first time that I built it, so it was no surprise. With this out of the way, it's time to start doing the fun stuff. And by that, of course, I mean re-scribing and welding the entire vehicle. BMP hulls have a lot of welds placed right on the edges, so the scribing job requires extra precision. On the other hand, a lot of them are hinted at in the kit, and I use these the same way aircraft modelers use positive panel lines on old kits, as a guide for the scribing tool. A straight edge can easily slip on the surface, and this time I tried using the metal sanding block from Steady Tools as my guide. Thanks to the fine sandpaper glued to the other side, it stayed firmly in place. So, if you encounter similar problems, you can try modifying your scribing guide by gluing a fine 1200 grade sandpaper or so to the opposite side. The rounded weld around the turret was tricky, but the Tamiya scriber, combined with some patience, got the job done. Of course, a bit of sanding is always necessary, and to give them a super clean look, I went over each groove with small amounts of Mr. Cement S. While I was doing all of that, some bolts were standing in my way, so when I removed a handful, I decided to remove and replace all of them. I mean, it's not necessary, but if you need to replace a few, then it's worth replacing every one for consistent results. And as you'll see later, it'll also open up a few creative options for us. And just like with the weld lines, I also rescribed every single panel for a sharper, deeper look. Next up was texturing, naturally. Tamiya grey putty diluted with Mr. Cement S and a stiff paintbrush. Applying steel textures to a lightly armored vehicle such as the BMP might be a questionable choice, but it's undeniable how much better the unpainted model is gonna look. And the advantages go beyond vanity. The subtle textures add contrast between the individual panels, and they greatly enhance your painting experience, especially when you're working with diluted washes or hairspray chipping. Most people call these casting imperfections, but I call them casting features. Long story short, the gun housing and the mantlet are cast steel, and as such, have noticeably rough texture compared to the rest of the vehicle, so I used thicker putty to simulate just that. Here we have the model ready for welding. Grooves and panel lines are scribed, and the armor plates have subtle textures. But before we start with the welding, there's a bunch of other stuff. There are multiple small details that can be glued beforehand, because these are also welded to the vehicle. In some cases, such as on these lifting eyes, one would be tempted to make them again from wire, but in real life, they're cast steel, so they're perfectly fine. They just need to be drilled out. What should be made from wire are these hooks for tow cables, because the plastic ones are quite out of scale. I superglued them from the inside of the vehicle, and lastly, this small brace under the exhaust panel is also welded to the hull. And now for the actual welding, as usual with my favorite Tamiya epoxy putty quick type. Mix it together and roll it between two plastic sheets into thin noodles. The welds on the BMP are quite delicate, not exactly what we are used to on heavy German or Soviet tanks, but the thin yet deep grooves will help us greatly with the overall fineness. The putty itself is very sticky when it's fresh, but as it starts to solidify, it becomes progressively more difficult to apply comfortably. But on the other hand, it then becomes easier to texture. So to maximize the usage of the mixed putty, I keep applying it into as many grooves as possible before it starts getting too sturdy to comfortably stuff inside. Then, once that happens, I switch to my texturing tools. These days, I mostly use a sharp hobby blade for messy, multiple pass welds, or my old, custom C-shaped tool. It's a very rudimentary piece of soda can bent into a half pipe, glued to a toothpick. Nothing more. The weld texture on the BMP-1 varies slightly, and generally it's not too prominent, but their small size and limited working space made me choose the C-shaped tool for pretty much everything. This is a really fun and relaxing process, and the added detail and authenticity makes all those hours put into it totally worth it. Just imagine how much fun it'll be to apply pin washes on these, and to bring them out with some shiny metallic chipping in the next video. Next up, replacing the bolts. I had a lot of these as leftovers from my Pacific P16 project, and I actually designed and printed them myself. They're very sharp and look much better than the original ones in the kit. I also used this opportunity to keep some of them missing, according to references, and it's another way of adding lots of subtle visual candy. The big transmission cover was also secured with superglue because it required some brute force to fit perfectly. And now, with all of these elements in place, the model is starting to come together, even though we only used a handful of kit parts. Now it's time to make the model look extremely delicate, and for that, the Photo-etched set from ET Models will be used. Starting out with the periscopes, which might seem weird, but hear me out. The clear parts from the kit are great, but what we often perceive as periscope is just the cover bent from thick sheet metal. The periscope itself is the small thing inside, and these parts replicate that perfectly, including the tiny gap between the scope and the cover. The small tie-downs on the turret come with the set, but unfortunately they're too flat and too wide, so I took the unpleasant route and bent them from 0.2mm copper wire. This honestly wasn't fun at all, but I believe it was totally worth it. To integrate them into the surface a little better, diluted Tamiya putty was applied around them. The aluminum wave breaker is also a part of the set, and although the plastic part looks more three-dimensional, it's the authentic working hinges and everything on this one that won me over. These might look like a nightmare to bend into shape, but if you use a photo-etched bending tool to clamp them down, it's actually a pretty straightforward job. Right next to it are electric cable sockets for the headlights. These are not really photo-etched details, but I made them from drilled out plastic rods, and 0.3mm lead wires were connected into them. The engine intake meshes are cleverly designed, and all of the small tie-downs and bolts are a part of them. They just need to be bent into shape so there's no struggle with glue and accuracy. Also, I made sure to glue them really tight in place because adding dents to the mesh is a pretty drastic procedure that can even rip the mesh into pieces, but that's totally fine. It's realistic damage. Even though the kit comes with these, the aftermarket replacements are infinitely finer and just better. I also like that the set addresses the insides of the hatches. These are full of interesting details that will be right there in the open. I just added a rubber seal made from lead wire and a few of my own handmade improvements. I have no idea why there's a cable going into a hatch, but it's supposed to be there, and I'm happy to have another interesting detail. A lot of the photo etch has these small mounting points, which are a cool addition, but I think having one is more than enough. Let me show you. I dry fit the shovel mount to the model, mark out the hole, then drill it out, and then I glue the part into the hole using the mounting point. And I still have enough time to position it properly because it just moves around. Of course, not all of them come with this feature, but when it's there, it's worth considering using it because it's not just about the easy placement, but also it creates a very strong bond on all of these fragile pieces. One of the scariest jobs on this model were the large hinges on the infantry hatches. Turns out, bending and assembling them was the easy part. It was their proper placement that was a total nightmare. Well, I mean, placing them on one side, that's fine, but matching the opposite side is where the trouble begins. And I think I had to rip them off like twice and relocate them to make it all look kinda okay. That's probably just my clumsiness and the result isn't perfect, but it's magnitudes better than the solid blocks that were molded in the kit. Photo-etched mudguards are often the bane of every armor modeler, but again, if you use a photo-etched bending jig, it's often a very pleasant job actually. Somehow, the common sentiment is that you always have to solder these together, but I'd say it depends on their complexity and how much damage do you want to introduce to them later. In this case, assembling them with superglue was more than fine, and I've done it on several models in the past as well. The right mudguard on this particular vehicle has been partially ripped off, while the left one is slightly mangled. To make this job easier, I replaced the brass swimming louvers with exact replicas made from pewter foil. This material is so soft it bends under its own weight, and it's also very flexible. As such, I was able to almost perfectly replicate the real damage without too much fuss. So what do you think, my friends? A simple brick of a vehicle and there's so much fine stuff going on all over the surface. The photo-etched aftermarket was a really worthy investment for this project, especially for the mudguards, which were actually the main reason I bought it. Let's now put the running gear together, shall we? Road wheels have this very intricate ribbing on them. I guess that's how they come out of the factory, because I've never seen it on any actual BMP that was in use for like a day. But it doesn't matter as they're pretty easy to remove. Well, I guess easy is a subjective term, because when you have to do it 12 times, chances are it'll take some time and your fingers might actually start to hurt. The fit on the torsion bar swing arms is really tight, which is a welcome sight, and I'm keeping them dry fitted so I can later conform the suspension to the terrain, if needed of course. The click-together working tracks were a great addition back in the day. I'm saying that because when I built it 14 years ago, they were a pleasure to assemble and paint, but now they don't even hold together. The tolerances are too wide, and only about half of them can be actually clicked into each other. The rest, your only option is to glue them and quickly wrap the track around the running gear. I was able to make them work, sort of, but they're just so fragile it's not even funny. On the old one, they're still holding strong to this day, and in a moment you'll see me replacing them with 3D printed ones. But right now, it's time to make the Syrian Street Fighter armor kit from plastic profiles. The main structure is made from 2mm angle profiles. The hasty nature of the craftsmanship allowed me to build the entire armor cage in a pretty chill way, because imperfections of all sizes are actually a feature, not a bug. Just some rough estimates, bending by hand, and the track just snapped for the 5th time. You know what? This isn't fun anymore. The only thing the tracks are good for is the trash bin. Anyway, the big angle profiles are held to the hull with small drops of superglue, but everything else, constructed from various other sizes and shapes of plastic profiles, is glued together with modeling cement. My strategy here is to keep the side skirts durable yet easy to remove for painting. In theory, I can carefully pop them off, then remove the remnants of superglue and glue them back later once everything is painted and weathered. The right side of this BMP is severely improvised and seems to have been damaged by an explosion or an impact, but the real challenge comes next. You see, the protective cage is made from concrete reinforcing meshes. I tried to take the easy route at first and looked for some photo-etched meshes that would be similar in size. The spacing is 4mm by the way, but no dice. I also considered using an insect mesh for windows, but that's just too lame and also too robust and out of scale. I also considered 3D printing these at an angle, where the hexagonal profile would be self-supporting, in theory. But ultimately, I decided that making them from individual 0.2mm copper wires was probably the best, easiest, quickest and most authentic and least painful way. Least painful is a questionable statement because it's a slow job that quickly becomes tiresome, but it's seriously the only option that seemed legit enough to me. These are welded flat on top of each other, not intertwined like chicken wire, so the assembly isn't in theory too difficult. And once everything is glued together, the resulting structure is surprisingly firm. I just hope they won't fly off the moment I try to remove the whole side skirt from the model. The left side is much more elaborate, but the heavily improvised nature is still there. This side is again made from 2mm and 1.5mm angle profiles, some H-beams and square strips to hold them together, but the outer frame has these massive U-beams. On top of that, there's a thick wire going through most of them, and you'll see later why it's there. This side skirt is gonna look more like a box once we're done with it. First, I had to do the same mesh thing all over again, but this time along the entire length of the vehicle. Not fun at all. By the way, do you know how to straighten up a bent wire? I'll tell you, you'll just roll it on the workbench and it's gonna be perfectly straight. So yeah, I did the meshes again, and then the real fun began with copper sheets. Here are some cool tips for this material. For cutting, it's best to make a few passes with the blade and then bend and break it off instead of slicing all the way through. It's cleaner and quicker, and you're actually sparing your hobby blades. If the sheet is bent, you can roll it like pizza dough to make it flat. It's also worth sanding and polishing the edges for a cleaner, more professional look. Annealing with fire is crucial if you need to make some intricate bends or indentations. Just don't burn your fingers on the hot metal. The sheet gets really soft after this, so you can do a lot of interesting stuff with it. It takes zero effort to crumple it in a realistic way, and the best proof of that is adding these visible dents around the large U-beams, according to references. This is the reason I didn't pay that much attention to the meshes, because most of them, as you see, or rather not see, will be completely obscured by the wall of rusty metal. I think it looks absolutely brutal, doesn't it? But painting the whole thing will be quite tricky in some places. But anyway, let's make a protective cage for the turret. Here, the angle beams are much smaller and more delicate, so I decided to bend them from copper. Make 2 passes in 1mm increments. One will act as a cutting and breaking guide, and the other will help you to bend the strip in half into a 90-degree angle. It's a bit tricky to film it clearly, but the result should be quite self-explanatory. The only proper way to cut them to length is by chopping from both sides, and you might need to fix some unwanted dents because of that. Here I found it easier to assemble them beforehand because their size is identical. There's 10 of them, and they're welded all around the turret like a crown, and their purpose is to hold lengths of rebar in place. So let's DIY some of that ourselves. You need to grab a bigger length of copper wire, bend it in half, and put one end into an electric drill while holding the other end with tweezers, and then just twist it with the drill. It usually snaps at the right time when it can't take any more of the tension, and the result is a pretty sick looking length of rebar. I made two sizes, one from 0.2 and one from 0.3 millimeters according to photos, and glued them in random lengths around the turret. Some of them were annealed with fire to make subtle damage and dents easier to add. And just like that, the turret became twice as big and 10 times as epic. I even added the broken searchlight just like on the real one, and some padding so the crew won't get injured. Just as I was finished with the armor kit, the 3D printed tracks from Panzerwerk arrived. They're my favorite brand of aftermarket tracks, even though I used to be a Friul model fanboy for years. But the crispiness of the details and overall pleasant experience while assembling these won me over. These actually need to be glued with tiny amounts of super glue on one end, so the assembly is actually more complicated and not as pleasant as usual, but still, they're just fun to work with, and what's most important, they're tough as nails, even though 3D printing resin is usually seen as a brittle material. Before I knew it, they were ready, and to make them easily disconnected for painting, I shortened two of the long connectors, which can be now slit from both ends. I painted them orange so they'll be easier to identify, and just look at how good they look. I mean, sure, the details are much better, that's cool, but it's the sight of a track that doesn't fall apart the moment you sneeze near it that truly pleases me. The last field mod on this particular BMP is this odd smokestack above the exhaust. I made it removable for painting, and it's truly odd because when you look at it, it actually blocks the turret from full rotation. Yes, it's strange, but it's also in the references, so I'm not questioning it. If you remember the beginning of the video, I also bought a set of Syrian tankers from Focus Miniatures. These are the only ones I found, and I'm honestly glad that we have a dedicated set for this specific conflict. Fitting them inside the hatches took some effort, and it didn't come without injuries, but I think they'll look amazing when they're painted. If, of course, I don't mess something up. But anyway, that's gonna be it for tonight, my friends. What was originally intended as a restoration project for one of my old models that nobody wanted to buy turned into a brand new project that took me 3 weeks to build. The armor kit definitely caught me off guard, although I don't know why I was expecting to be done with it in an evening or two. Instead, it took me 5 days to build the side skirts, but on the other hand, it was time well spent. I was unpleasantly surprised by the kit tracks because they were amazing on my first model, and I also wanted to show you that in some cases, what comes with the kit is actually pretty good enough, and you don't have to act like a modeling snob and replace everything with aftermarket just because reasons. But in this case, they were truly unusable, as you saw. Maybe it's the wear on the injection molds that have been running for 15 years, or maybe just operator error. Either way, tracks aside, the unpainted BMP looks quite menacing and it's pretty fun to look at, especially the heat-treated copper sheets. In the next video, we'll go to town with hairspray chipping. There will be a lot of rust, according to my detailed references, and a lot of dust as well, because this is the desert subject I talked about in the previous video. I think Syrian conflict was the first one in modern history where these crazy, improvised field modifications were introduced at such a large scale, and I always like to revisit these subjects from time to time. Until the next one, my friends, thank you for all of your support. You have turned my life for the better, and I'll be always thankful to every single one of you. Special thanks goes to my patrons because their help allows me to buy the same kit twice, and if you're one of them, thank you so much, because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be able to build models for a living. You'll get a lot of cool stuff if you join me on Patreon. I post regular updates, share work-in-progress photos, various thoughts and observations from the workbench, and we can keep in touch through DMs, comments, and emails. Top tier patrons get early access to all of my videos, completely ad-free, and also my Patreon exclusive video format called Night Shift Throwback, where I go back to the latest video and talk about every technique and detail and interesting part in long-winded detailed monologues. These videos are usually an hour long, making them perfect to listen to while you're modeling as a sort of podcast. There are also bonus extras like 3D printable parts for your own projects, reference photos from real life, and high-resolution studio shots of all of my models that show way more detail than video ever could. Your financial support is appreciated, but never expected. Anyway, I started building the model a day after we returned from our honeymoon, so I was fully refreshed and I filled, scribed, and textured the entire model in one day. But the next day I was already exhausted and unproductive again. Anyway, can't wait to start putting some hairspray chipping on the model, so I guess I'll see you in the next one. Build your models, don't just hoard them. Cheers!